Welcome to this very special edition of 18th Century Cooking. I'm your host, John Townsend, and today we're doing a recipe that I have never done before, and I have no idea how it's going to turn out or even how to do it. It's called How to Make Hertfordshire Cakes. Thanks for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century. This set of directions, a recipe, is from The Country Housewife's Family Companion by William Ellis. This is 1750. And let me read to you these directions, we'll call them that. How to make Hertfordshire cakes, nuts, and pincushions. These are much used in Hertfordshire for giving farmers' servants a changeable dinner now and then to their satisfaction. For if they are made as they should be, the men are generally fond of them. To do which, our housewife puts skimmed milk and hog's lard over the fire, warms them only for mixing, then takes some flour, sugar, yeast, an egg or two with the powder of Jamaica spice, and makes a paste of these and the milk and fat as if for pie crust. And when it is worked and rolled enough to the thinness of about 1/4 of an inch, she cuts these out to 2-inch square pieces, boils them in hog's lard in a little kettle or in a stew pan or frying pan. Others roll up this paste in the shape of walnuts and dress them the same manner as the square pieces. And then there's a note. No fat is so good for this as hog's lard. You know it. Because the lard hollows the cushions or nuts and makes them look whiter than any other fat does, though some want for this to make them with drippings, etc. So there we go. It's some kind of like English donut? I have no idea. So, I'm not even sure exactly how these are going to turn out. There's some interesting things here. We've got the use of warmed up fats and milk, so we mix with the flour here. And what are they spiced with? Not expensive nutmeg, nope, Jamaica spice, probably referring to Jamaica pepper, which is another name for allspice. So it's likely this is, that's a spice that's coming in from the West Indies, not nearly as expensive to bring in as something way out from, the South Seas or the East Indies. So an inexpensive spice, we can still make them spicy for these servants, but notice these aren't for the well-to-do table, but these are for the workers in your farm. So let's walk through this. We've got all the ingredients here. I got all the different things listed here, but of course we have no idea, except for an egg or two, we have no idea what the amounts are. Isn't it funny that he says that, and right above it, it says, if they are made as they should be, the men will like them. But he doesn't actually tell us what the amounts are supposed to be. Well, we're just going to have to kind of bumble our way through this. We can use some of the experience we've had with recent episodes and kind of get a guess. We do have a hint here. We do have a hint as to the consistency. We're supposed to get all these things mixed together, and they're supposed to be like a pie crust. So that gives us a hint. And we know that we're going to start to work with our liquids first, which is skimmed milk. So the inexpensive thing again, right? So these are for servants. We don't want to use the good stuff. We're going to use skimmed milk. I've got maybe 2 cups, 1.5 cups. Don't want to make a giant quantity. And then for the fat, instead of using something rich like butter or, using cream, no, we're going to use lard. So let me just get a couple of ounces of lard off of here. There's our lard. This needs to warm up. Unlike a pie crust where we have cold butter and we mix it in. Nope, we're not doing that. We don't need to have a flaky pie crust here necessarily, so we're gonna warm these up. So let me put this on the fire. Again, just warming them up. We've got yeast that comes in later on. We don't want it to be hot and kill the yeast. So just warmed up. So the lard and the milk are heating up over here. While they heat up, let's get these sort of dry ingredients here. Again, we don't know exactly how much flour we're going to use right off the bat. I'm gonna put about half of what I've got here in our main mixing bowl. We've got our Jamaica pepper for flavor, and I've got powdered allspice here. And again, boy, I just don't know. I'm gonna go with about a teaspoonful and mix that into our flour. And the rest of the ingredients, well, we got sugar here. Now, how much sugar should we put in? How sweet do we expect them to be? Well, these are for working guys. They would have probably skimped on the sugar. I'm not gonna necessarily skimp on the sugar. Let's put a 1/4 cup in. I don't know, we'll mix that in nicely. And no salt, no, not called for. It's sweet, so the other ingredients here are yeast, an egg or two, and then our mixture. So here's our warmed up, again, not too hot. We don't want to kill off our yeast. We're just gonna pour that in. Let's see, about 2 cups worth. There we go. Again, we don't know exactly where we're going, but I doubt that the amounts have to be just super perfect anyway. It's kind of sloppy. It's not going to be a paste yet. We'll have to add other things, but let's get our other liquids. I've got 1 egg in here. Since we're not making a giant mixture of this, let's get that egg mixed in there. And it's still just a little bit warm, so it's perfect time for us to put our yeast in. You can use standard yeast you're going to find in the store, packet yeast. I would take maybe a 1/2 packet and put it in just a little bit of water to dissolve it, and then in it goes. The yeast in the time period would have been liquid yeast you got from the brewer, and it's probably pretty similar. Okay, definitely not paste-like enough, certainly not. So let's add more flour. There we go. We'll see how this mixes in. There we go, a little bit more flour. Ooh, using up all my flour. Have to get more. So we end up needing even more flour, but that's all right. Still just a hair more. Okay, now it's starting to really get there. I don't want it to be so hard I can't roll it out, but I don't want it to be super soft either. At least, I don't know. I mean, the directions don't necessarily say so, right? So, but we'll get it. We'll get in there. We'll get it right. So there you go. Yeah, it looks good. Don't tell anybody. Yeah, I think it's going to be about right. Right kind of sweetness to it. Not too much, not too little. Got that allspice there. Oh yeah. This is going to turn out really good. Let's sprinkle a little flour out and roll this into our 1/4 inch thick stuff. There we go. There we go. Let's see what the other side looks like. Yep. So you might wonder why William Ellis's recipe is so vague. And really, he's giving a direction to people who aren't necessarily farmers. He's like saying, this is what farming life is like, and here are some ideas. He knows that the people who are actually going to be using it, either that they aren't ever going to do it, this is just a description so they know what's going on, or the person in the kitchen already has a good idea. It's like, oh, you mean just make that kind of paste and then fry it up, right? So that's what's going on there. They expect the person to already know kind of what it's going to be like. And we get some ideas because we've read lots and lots of other recipes in the 18th century cookbooks. We can get a good idea. Just like the mixing of this, the heating up the milk and the lard is just like the cracknels that we did very recently, almost exactly the same thing. So we get an idea about exactly why they're going where they're going with some of this description. We don't need to have exact amounts because we're going to adapt this to our needs anyway. So I'm getting close. It's about a 1/4 inch thick. This stuff always wants to kind of go back to its thicker, trying to go back to the ball, doesn't it? But this is probably about right. It depends on how we want to cook these also. If we make them too thick, then they'll be a little trickier to get them fried up right. If we make them a little thinner, they'll be easier to cook. But he called them, what, 3 different things. Cakes, which usually means just sort of like little, like little cookie shapes, right? And then the nuts, which means to make them in a nut shape like a walnut. And then, what's the other one? It was pin cushions, sort of puffed up like a donut. Yeah. So we're gonna cut these up into little squares. Okay, our fire is going. Let's get the pan on the fire to warm this up. And it called for 2 different methods. We could either sort of deep fat fry them in the little kettle, or we could pan fry them. I figure, if you're gonna try these at home, let's do pan frying. That's a little bit easier. We don't have to have special equipment. And, it didn't say necessarily to fry them in lard, but he didn't say to not do that. So we've got the lard here, let's do it. Okay, so for the first couple ones I put in there, the oil was probably a little too hot. And they puffed up though. They did this thing. Remember they called it a pincushion. Well, looks like they did exactly what a pincushion would do. The oil's a little not quite so hot here, so these are probably going to be a little more dense. I'll let the oil heat up again for the next batch. Again, we can kind of experiment and see exactly how they turn out depending on how hot they cook. Here they are. Look at those things. They're beautiful. It turned out I didn't have to experiment too much, and they smell great. Okay, I cheated. Obviously, you can see I sprinkled sugar over the top of these guys. I'm surprised I wasn't scraping nutmeg on them. I didn't do that. I put the sugar on, but I didn't do the nutmeg because they have allspice in them. Let's try one out, right? So they smell a little meaty because, of course, they've been cooked in lard. But that's what they called for. Nice and tender, not too dense. Look at this guy. They called them pin cushions, right? Well, you can see it looks exactly like a pin cushion. Depending on exactly what the temperature of that fat in the pan, boy, that yeast took off and they grew right up, and it'll be like a hollow spot in the middle. Look at that, sort of, like a popover or something. Super good, cooked all the way through. They cook really fast. That 1/4 inch thick, they just cook right up. If it was the nut style where you made them a little, bulkier, they're a little more dense because of the way they cook, but still really, really good. So this allspice flavor comes through wonderfully. Again, that kind of gives us a fall time period, and fall is when these are probably being made most of the time. These are, when you have a lot of farm workers in that time period, it's generally harvest time. So these are a harvest time thing that you would have in that time period. And again, not a dessert for the rich man's table, but the dessert for servants. And boy, are they good. It's always fun with these experiments where there's a lot to learn, and really the only way to find out exactly what they're going to be like is to cook them up, which is what we've done here. If I did it over and over again 3 or 4 more times, I'd adjust this a little bit more. I'd probably put a little bit more sugar if I wanted them to be sweet in their, in the dough part, not just on top. And we could play with maybe a little bit of salt, maybe a little of this or that. But, with just guessing the way through this recipe, it turned out great. And again, the only way you can really find out about some of these recipes or even ideas is to just go at it and try it and see what happens. And it gives us a really good idea about what this 18th century recipe was trying to get at. If you're interested in another one of these experimental episodes, a few years back we did pendants with Michael Dragoo. That one turned out great.